You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another NCAA Tournament Week special here on the Assembly Call. I am your host, Jerod Morris, and very excited today to have a special guest to give us insight on Indiana's first-round opponent in the NCAA Tournament. The Hoosiers will, of course, face Kent State in the late slot on Friday night. If you haven't heard, that game will tip at 9:55 Eastern Time. Which is crazy, but, something that we're used to as Indiana fans because they want that Indiana fan base there driving eyeballs for them. But as we always do when the Hoosiers make the NCAA tournament, we try to bring you as much perspective on Indiana's opponent as we can because typically it's an opponent that we don't know much about. And so we have a special treat to do that today. After the pairings were announced yesterday, I put out a tweet just asking for who would be, a good voice to bring on to give us some insight on Kent State. And I got a reply from somebody who said he grew up as an IU fan and now plays for Akron, which, of course, is Kent State's big rival in the MAC. They just played in the MAC conference tournament, and said he'd be able to come on and give us some insight. And so very, very excited to welcome to the show Evan Wilson from the Akron Zips, here to give us some insight on their rival, Kent State. Evan, welcome to the Assembly Call. Awesome to have you, man. I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's start out. I want to get into your backstory a little bit. So I know just kind of from looking at your bio, you grew up in Noblesville, so I have to assume you're a Tom Coverdale fan. If you actually, I guess I shouldn't assume that since now, I think you were born in 2002, which was Tom Coverdale's, of course, big moment leading IU to the finals. Maybe I'm showing how old I am by assuming that. But yeah, give us your basketball backstory and, growing up an IU fan and then how you ended up at Akron.
Yeah, so I've played basketball my whole life. Obviously, like you mentioned, I'm from Noblesville. Basketball's in my genes. It's in my blood. My dad actually walked on and played basketball at Alabama. My sister plays basketball at Noblesville, and she's committed to Iowa State. So if we're not discussing family matters, we're usually talking about basketball in the house. So I've grown up around the sport. My mom is a graduate of Indiana. When it was also instilled in my blood that Purdue's a big no-no and Indiana's the way to go. So I've been paying a lot of close attention to Indiana probably since about the Tom Pritchard days, Derek Elston, Jordan Halls. When they had those previous struggles and they had that come to life where they topped them out at number one and kind of took off with Zeller and Oladipo and Watford and those guys. But yeah, I've been a huge Indiana fan my whole life. Even in my journey to walk on at the University of Akron, I've still stayed very close in touch with Indiana. We actually made the tournament last year, lost a close one to UCLA. And if we would have won that game and Indiana would have won that game, we would have met in the round of 32, it's still just,
oh, that's right.
A very full circle moment for me that we were a couple games away from playing what was my childhood dream of a team. So Indiana through and through, love the Hoosiers. But like I said, I love where I'm at as a player as well. I love the University of Akron and love the journey that I've had here as well for the 2 years that I've been here.
What ended up sending you out there to Akron?
So I was in the position as a senior during the COVID recruiting process where, as a player, we didn't know what was going to happen for eligibility wise. Are guys going to get another year? Are guys not? I wasn't getting much traction. I had no traction Division I. I'm a walk on. I was getting D2, D3 NAIA looks. And one thing my dad always mentioned to me is that he was in the same position as well. And the journey he had at Alabama, just being able to see the biggest stage and the brightest lights is something that he loved to do. And I kind of took that to heart and kind of ran with that. And when the opportunity came up, Coach Gross recruited me as a walk-on, and I took the opportunity. And I'm really glad that I have. Obviously, going to the tournament is a dream come true for any basketball player growing up. So being able to have that experience last year was awesome. I've really loved my time here. Coach Gross is awesome. The staff is awesome. I've loved all my teammates. So it's been a hell of a ride so far.
Coach Gross, formerly the coach at Illinois, and he was at Ohio before that, right? I believe.
Correct. He was at Ohio and actually had, two appearances, but one for sure where they lost in the Sweet 16 in overtime to North Carolina. So he's had plenty of tournament success as well and understands the value and the excitement of March Madness.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into this. I mean, I think you are really uniquely positioned to give insight on this matchup because I know, even though you're playing at Akron, I know you still follow the Hoosiers closely. And then obviously you have very intimate knowledge of Kent State, having played them 6 times over the last 3 years. So before we dive into just kind of talking about the strengths and weaknesses and how they match up, give me your impressions of Indiana so far this year. Just what you've seen from the team, what you've liked, and maybe what you think are some question marks heading into the tournament from your perspective.
Yeah, so like I mentioned to you earlier, I've watched just about every Hoosier game I can, depending on my own schedule, my own practice and game schedule. Which luckily they've tipped off a lot of 9 o'clock games during the week, so we play our
Yes.
game, and I go home and get a bite to eat and turn on the Hoosiers. So it's been I've been pretty lucky this season to be able to watch them a lot. Obviously, it doesn't take a dummy to turn on the TV and realize that Trace carries a heavy load. I was just on ESPN and seen that he's logged over 1,000 minutes. His field goal percentage with the amount of attempts that he's taking is absolutely sick to shoot that percentage with the amount of looks and touches he gets. Obviously, it's very known that Jalen Hood-Schifino's coming to his own, especially after that Purdue game. Fans and I'm sure the staff really realize that they can continue to rely heavily on him, especially in a high pressure scenario like March Madness. Really love the work that Trey Galloway has done too. Kind of an unsung hero. Defensively, he really gets after it. It's hard not to be a fan of the way he plays because he plays so hard,
Yeah.
plays very smart. I guess my one worry going into the tournament is the surrounding core. There's going to be a game if they're going to make a deep run. There's going to be a game where Trace isn't playing as well as normal. Maybe Jalen's not shooting well. Who's going to step up after that? Is my biggest worry for them. I think we've seen it from a lot of different people though this year. Tamar Bates has struggled, but he's absolutely capable. Malik Renew his minutes are up and down, but he's absolutely capable. Caleb Banks has even shown positions where he's been capable as well. So I also think I'm a huge Miller Kopp fan. Love what he does in the NIL world. Love what he does on social media and as a player. A lot of respect for him. So he has to be sharp. Being a fifth-year guy, he has to be sharp. Not only on the floor but off the floor with the way he carries himself through meetings and scouting reports and stuff like that. He has to be a leader, more so off the court than on. But I love what the team has. I love the spot that they've been given. I don't mind them at a 4 seed. It kind of makes them not a heavy favorite, which I wouldn't love for them to be a heavy favorite. I think they're better coming from under and kind of surprising some people nationally. So they definitely have a team to make a deep run, but I think their biggest hangup would be supporting cast, who's going to step up because there's going to be a game where somebody struggles and we're going to need somebody to step up.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this. I want to get a player's perspective on this because, minutes played has been a huge issue for Indiana and a huge talking point, right? Trace is playing all these minutes. Jalen hasn't gotten a break in 3 games, I don't think. He's played, 40 minutes back-to-back, 2 straight games. And Kent State has a couple guys like that. I think Sincere Carey plays like 92% of their minutes. I was looking at your guys' team page at Akron, and you have, 3 guys that play, 78% of the minutes. So guys playing a lot of minutes. Is that overblown, talking about fatigue and these guys are getting tired and they need to get rest? Or at this point in the season, do you think that's just kind of part of it and, you guys are young enough that you can handle it? Where do you kind of fall on that? And what do fans need to understand about that issue?
I think it's really real throughout the course of a regular season. But to me personally, obviously, like I mentioned, I didn't touch the floor in March Madness. I was just there as a player. So I don't know what it's like to really be on the floor. But personally, I feel like if you can't get excited for March to see that March Madness on the floor and can't kind of like rejuvenate yourself and energize yourself to play hard, then I don't know if it's the place for you, really. Like, it's just such an unbelievable atmosphere as soon as you step in that gym. Even when we got off the plane, like, it just felt different. Like, being in March Madness, it just feels different. So I think this week is huge, though. Like you mentioned, we had some heavy minute guys, and one in particular, our big man, Enrique Freeman, who's an unbelievable player. If not just yourself, but if any of the fans listening haven't ever seen him play, watch his clips. He's unbelievable. Great guy.
Dude, his defensive rebounding percentage is 30%. Holy crap.
He's unbelievable. And like I mentioned, he's a great player, an even greater guy off the floor. But after we lost our last regular season game against Kent, we were given a couple of days off. And I think you could even see the juice in him having just a couple of days off, like getting a little break before you go into a very important part of your season. So I think this week is huge. Obviously, I'm not I'm not a player for Indiana. Don't know what their plan is this week, but rest is huge. But like I mentioned, it's March Madness. It's the best time of the year in college basketball. I think once that ball is tipped, guys are going to be ready to go because it's such a coveted event, and everybody realizes that.
Yeah. All right, so let's turn our attention to Kent State. Like we said, you've been part of an Akron team that's played them 6 times in the last 2 years, I believe. So you've seen them up close. Give me kind of your scouting report on them, strengths and weaknesses. What are the things they do really well, and what are maybe some weaknesses Indiana has a chance to attack?
Man, rivalry aside, they are one of the toughest teams physically and mentally that you'll come across. They just anytime there's a run made against them, they don't flinch. Anytime they make a run, they don't flinch. Like they are just a really, really, really tough team. And I think that what stands out the most that proves that is defensively how good they are. They are tough. They're smart. They're super physical. But I think I just checked NCAA this morning, and I think they're 12th in the nation in steals per game. So that's a proving point of how just nasty they are. They're just a nasty group. Offensively, they're kind of the same. They're led by they have great guard play and Sincere, Carey, and Malik Jacobs. Those guys are great leaders for them. But if Sincere, if the ball's not in Sincere's hands, those guys are trying to be really physical down low. Malik Jacobs is super physical in the post. Their post players don't get a lot of post up, like traditional post up touches, but when they get it, they're super physical. Their 3-man Von Cameron Davis, he's super physical. So it's almost like you feel like you're trying to get punked, like they're trying to punk you. It kind of challenges you, but they're just super physical and high energy, like I mentioned to you earlier off the air. I've played basketball for a long time, and there's not a team that feeds off energy as much as them as I've ever seen. Anytime they get a dunk, if Sincere hits a 3, if they get a charge, if they get a block, they get a steal, like those guys they play really hard for one another. And when good things start going, man, they have a lot of energy and they're tough to stop. So very deserving team. They played Toledo in the MAC championship, who was second in the nation in points per game and just offensively really good. And Kent found a way. I mean, they just were nasty, and they found a way to slow them down. And in turn, Kent put up 90 plus, which I don't think even from just a predictive standpoint, based on statistics, I don't think anybody would have predicted Kent to put 90 over Toledo in it when Toledo's, the offensive juggernaut. So they just find a way. They're super tough mentally and physically, and just a very good team.
The way that you describe them and just kind of, reading about them, they sound a lot like Rutgers. How would you compare them to Rutgers, which is a team obviously that Indiana has seen and had varying levels of success against this season?
Yeah, it's a pretty good comparison. The Rutgers is kind of in your face. They kind of don't care. They're going to challenge you almost more mentally than they will physically and skillfully. And don't get me wrong, Kent's a very skilled team, but they're going to challenge you. They're not going to stand down. You never know in March Madness when you get double digit versus single digit seeded games. Sometimes they're blowouts. Sometimes it's just a bad matchup for the lower seed and they're a blowout. And sometimes they're upsets the other way. It's a 10-point upset. Not making a prediction, and no one here is here to make predictions, but they're going to walk into that gym and they're not going to be scared of anything. They are battle tested. They lost by a couple possessions to Houston and probably should have had that one. Probably could have had Gonzaga too, at Gonzaga, which are two really good tournament teams. Lost a close one to Charleston. They won 30 plus games this season and cleaned house in their tournament and their conference. So I think the confidence level is there for them. And like you mentioned, Rutgers is, whether they're coming off 3 losses or 3 wins, they're not backing down. They're there. They're ready. They're ready for war. They're ready to battle. And Kent's the same way. They're going to walk in that gym and they don't care that it says Indiana on their chest. They're ready. They're ready to go. So I think Rutgers is a pretty good comparison to them, just mentally where they stand and their confidence and their physicality.
Where are kind of the weaknesses from a Kent State perspective that you think Indiana could take advantage of based on Indiana's personnel and how Indiana typically likes to play?
Yeah, it's a good question. Kent, off the catch and shoot, they have a couple guys that are pretty good, but as a team, they're not a huge 3-point shooting team. Jalen Sullinger, 6th man of the year in the MAC, is on their team, and he's a microwave. He gets off the bench and he's coming in to shoot the ball, and he can fill it up really fast. Their starting 4-man, Myron Thomas, can really shoot it well too. really good pick and pop guy. But as a team, they're not going to hit 13 threes. You know, they're not going to light you up from the 3-point line. And when you look back to, I think it was the Northwestern game, we look back and IU kind of got dotted. I mean, and I saw a thread on Twitter, and the threes were open threes. So, you know, if that's not going to be a huge struggle for Indiana, because Kent's not going to hit 15 threes on you and pressure you that way. So yeah, I think that would be, you know, if Kent were to hit 10 threes, it's a ball game now. It's on for the Hoosiers. So that's one thing that isn't their bread and butter. But you know, we talk about all the time as a team in a 1-game setting. You never know, especially in March Madness. You never know. So if they get a good feel and they start hitting some threes, it could be trouble. But the numbers will say that they're not coming in to hit 10 threes when they play on Friday.
From an offensive perspective, looking at Indiana's offense, where do you think they can take advantage? Because Kent State obviously is a really good defensive team. The one thing, just when you, and I haven't watched them play, but just you look at the roster, it doesn't seem like they have a ton of size, which tends to be, you know, what gives Trace trouble is when he's going up against guys that are a lot bigger than him. Right. What do you see as maybe some places where Indiana offensively can take advantage of Kent State?
I think the biggest thing for Indiana is turnovers. Like I mentioned earlier, Kent is really good at taking your ball anywhere on the floor, not just up front with a point guard. It's in the post, it's in passing lanes. They know what play you're running. They pick you off. Like they can just take your ball whenever. So if a high turnover game for Indiana is going to heavily favor Kent. But you know, if Indiana has 11 turnovers and they're spread out, then it doesn't feel as bad. But if you have 15 turnovers and you get in 6 possessions, you get 4 of them, 4 turnovers from Indiana, then Kent's going to go on a run and they're going to have the momentum like they've done 1,000 times this season to all teams. You know, they get on a run because they feed off their defense. It goes back to their offense too. Their offense benefits from how good of a defensive team they are. You mentioned their size in the post. As much as they aren't tall and long, I think they make up for it physically. They've started 2 different 5s, but they tend to lean more on Claron Hornbeek, who's a great player. He's got great size. He actually shooting 73% on the season, which is sick. Doesn't matter how many attempts you got; it's a pretty good number. So he's physical. Their backup, sort of backup. Chris Payton is one of their big men. He's super physical. He can jump out of the gym. Both those guys are good rebounders. So. Those guys are tough defenders. Obviously, the Vegas and everybody's going to tell you that Trace is the favorite, but those guys are tough. They're good. They're good defenders. So the biggest thing for the Hoosiers would be the turnovers. You can't turn the ball over 15 times and beat them. And then offensive rebounding. If they have to offensive rebound on Kent, because a couple possessions is what can break a defense down. As good as a defensive team they are, it's hard to guard for a minute. If they were to have Kent out there for a minute, the odds of them scoring definitely go up. So cleaning up the glass and getting some second chance points and not turning the ball over is what's going to favor them.
I want to talk a little bit about the guard matchup, you know, because you talk about Kent State, that's the first thing most people bring up is Sincere Carey, Malik Jacobs. You know, they're 2 guys that play a ton of minutes. And they're, you know, obviously very active. They're both, you know, in the top 500 in the country in assist rate, but neither one is really all that efficient shooting wise. You know, Sincere Carey's effective field goal percentage is 46.1, Jacobs is 41.8, and they're both 6'1", which is obviously a disadvantage when going up against Jalen Hood-Schifino. From a matchup perspective, do you see one of those 2 guys guarding Jalen, or will they try and put someone taller on him, do you think?
That's a great question. You know, I can't speak to – there's so many in-depth analytics that coaches across the country use to kind of pick matchups. And then there's also scenarios where you got to throw the analytics out and just say who's going to man up and guard, you know? So I can't really speak to what the matchup is going to look like, but I was listening to Coach Bowles, who's the coach at the university or at Ohio University. He was on the Field of 68 podcast prior to the selection show happening. And we're kind of asking him, you know, like what's their strength, what their weaknesses, and kind of asked him some questions. And one thing, he made a great point that Sincere Carey is, even though his percentage might not be super efficient, he hits shots when they need them and when they matter. And I think it was especially important this weekend for them in the MAC tournament. If you watch our game and then their game against Toledo, if they were ever getting a run against them, he'd hit a 3. If they're ever on a 6-0 run, he hit another three and pushes to 9-0 run. So, he hits the really big ones, and he's a big time player in that aspect. So, numbers say that he's not very efficient, but some guys just have the clutch gene. Some guys just have it when the game's tight and it's time for somebody to get a bucket, he can get it. So that's something where no matter what, the game's close, someone better find him quick because he will put you away. He's really good at putting teams away.
What's funny, that actually describes Jalen in a lot of ways, who can be
Right,
pretty
yeah.
inefficient, but then when it's a big shot, you always think it's going in.
Yeah.
So I think you're right
Yeah.
about that.
That
Are
matchup,
there?
as just a fan, that matchup's awesome. Like, if you know anything about Kent, you know anything about Indiana, you're excited about that matchup. You got a freshman who's likely going to be a one and done. You got a fifth-year guy who's been at Duquesne prior and is at Kent, and he's their bread and butter. He's their leader. So it's a hell of a storyline, hell of a matchup. And as a fan, not even being an Indiana fan or not even knowing Kent, just being a neutral fan watching that, it should be a pretty good battle.
Yeah. Are there any other matchups, kind of individual matchups that you think might favor one side or the other?
Not really. Like I said, I'm a player. I don't make those decisions that the coaches make. Those are tough decisions that they have to make prior to games, and those are decisions they have to make in game to switch a matchup here or there.
Yeah.
I just think their toughness is so good. I really the Jalen Solinger. I can't emphasize enough how much of a microwave he is. He's averaging 0.7 assists on the season, which I think is a testament to how much of a microwave he is. Like when he comes in, he can score it anyway. And I think in the 6 games that I've been a part of against Kent, I've seen him hit layups. I've seen him hit pull-ups. I've seen him hit runners. I've seen him hit floaters. I've seen him hit on the line threes. I've seen him hit deep threes. Like he's got a bag of just tricks offensively. So that kid can play. So I'm excited to watch him play against a power 5 opponent. And then Chris Payton is a guy, he can jump out of the gym. If you go on Twitter or Instagram or anything and check his highlights from the Toledo championship game, he was all over the rim. I think he had like maybe 1 layup and like 6 dunks or something crazy. Like when he gets in and around the rim, it's typically a highlight play. So that athleticism and physicality against a power 5 opponent will be fun to watch for sure.
How do you see kind of the rebounding playing out here? Because it's been a weakness for Indiana, in a lot of games. I mean, they've given up a lot of offensive rebounds, and they don't tend to be a team that does a lot of offensive rebounding themselves. But, you look at Kent State, that's kind of one of their defensive weaknesses is they're giving up, 30.2%, rebounding percentage. But, will Indiana actually commit enough to take advantage of that? On the other hand, they're pretty good from an offensive rebounding percentage, getting 30.8% of their misses.
Right. Yeah.
How do you see that potentially playing out?
Yeah. I think anybody that plays Kent understands that it's turnovers and it's offensive rebounds. They can take your ball and turn that into points. And then obviously the money in college basketball is transition and offensive second chance points because you get that offensive rebound and everybody's scrambling now because everybody went to rebound. You lose a guy like Jalen Solinger, you lose a guy like Sincere. That's a 3 points going down. So I think that's going to be a huge key for Indiana. You have to rebound against a team that's so good on the offensive glass like Kent. And then you mentioned conversely, they're not great on the other side, and it's because they send everybody offensively, so they give up points in transition sometimes. But I think they're in a game like that where the magnitude is so high of the game, especially from a mid-major, they're going to be more likely to be on top of things like that, more detailed. I can speak to that being a mid-major team. Like the pressure, I felt as a team way more pressure during the tournament, the MAC tournament, than the NCAA tournament. Because when you get there, you're an underdog, but that doesn't scare you. You also understand that upsets happen and that somebody's going to be an upset, and it's just, are we going to play well enough to get that magic on our side and make it happen? Because they happen every year. So in a situation like that, I expect Kent to be really on top of things like that because of how important it is to winning and losing for them. So I expect them to be crashing the offensive glass really hard and then trying to fix it on the other side of the ball as well.
Boy, it'll be interesting to see what the arena is like because, I mean, obviously we expect Indiana fans to travel pretty well, even though it's, all the way out in Albany, because Indiana just always has a good contingent of fans. But what's, interesting about the NCAA tournament is typically, the other groups of fans who are there will rally behind the underdog, if the underdog is playing well. And that'll be interesting from a Kent State perspective, because you're talking about how energetic they are and how much they feed off of that. For Indiana, you've got, and I think you mentioned this with, don't let the turnovers come in bunches. Don't let them get a lot of momentum, because not only will it get them juiced up, but in an NCAA tournament environment, I would imagine, they'll have the other fan bases there kind of cheering them on and kind of helping them sustain that energy.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the nose. We played, like I mentioned, we played UCLA. We played in Portland last year. So was not close to Akron, Ohio at all. We had a couple of donors and we had a couple of family members and some coaches' wives and coaches' family, and that was about it. Our section was right across the bench, and it was really small. And when we scored a bucket, we heard them, and that was about it. But we were all the way out in Portland. Being on the West Coast, before I looked it up, I'm like, okay, so UCLA should probably have a pretty good fan base since we're on the West Coast. Then when you look it up, they're a 10-hour drive. So they didn't pull, they obviously, because they're a bigger university and more historic, they had more fans per se, but it wasn't big. They didn't have a big fan base. And I think it's a great point you made that they're playing in Albany. Indiana travels well. They just do. So they're going to have a pretty good chunk, but Kent people, they're going to travel well because they're excited. And what you mentioned about being a mid-major and the fans being behind you. So we're warming up while we're the last game of the day we played on a Thursday. While we're warming up, they're playing the St. Peter's and Kentucky game on the screen. So we're warming up, and I'm hearing just random cheers and random yells from the crowd as a whole. And I'm like, what's going on? And when you look up there, St. Peter's is beating Kentucky, and it's a perfect point that you make that if the game is not, if the game's not in Columbus and Ohio State's playing in a tournament setting, they're going to root for the underdog. So if the game's close and like I mentioned, Sincere's a clutch player. It's a 2-point game, and Sincere hits a 3 with 3 to go. That crowd, if you're not wearing red, they're going to be Kent State fans. So that's what I think it's so beautiful about the tournament is that you have your strong Power 5 teams that their fans run deep and run wide, and they're going to travel. But if the game's close and the pressure's on, it starts to feel like a home game for the underdog. And I kind of felt that for our team as well when we played pretty well in the second half with about 4 minutes to go. The crowd starting to get a little louder. The first half was pretty quiet because, people are just watching the game and don't really have a dog in the fight. But when the game was close and they realized it was a ball game, they're like, okay, the Zips got a chance to make this happen. They're the underdog. We want to see an upset. So I think it's a great point that you make for Kent that if the game's close and gets close as the game winds down, it's going to start to feel more and more like a game for them back in Canton, Ohio at the Mack Center. People are going to be backing them. And like I mentioned, they're an energy team. They feed off of everything. If they get a sincere 3 or a big dunk with 3 to go, they are going to feed off of every fan in that arena that is rooting for an upset, which, is daunting for the Hoosiers, but it's motivation to put it away for them. If they put it away, then you don't experience that. If it's a ball game, it's a home game for Kent at that point.
Yeah. So I'm not going to ask you to make a prediction, but I am curious just what your gut feeling is on how this game will go. Kind of watching Indiana and seeing some of their ups and downs this year and knowing what you know about Kent State. What do you kind of expect to happen? What kind of pace do you feel this game will be played at? What's kind of your outlook on that?
Yeah, so Kent plays fast. They get a steal, they're out of there. So if like we mentioned before with the turnover battle, if they can create turnovers, they're going to dictate the pace. If they create turnovers early and often, the game will be played fast, and it's going to be played at their pace. I think the turnover battle is just so huge, man. I can't stop thinking about the turnover battle for both teams. You got to take care of the ball in any game, especially in this game. But I'm excited to watch Kent in a situation like that because of their energy. They feed off of everything that happens. But as Hoosier fans, we understand that there's 3, 4, 5 different Hoosier teams in a season. You get your team that goes into Purdue and wins pretty comfortably towards the end of the game, hits free throws and takes care of business and knocks off the number 1 team in the nation. And then you get the team that comes out flat at home against Iowa when they're so good at home and they were just flat, man. It wasn't them. And that's the team that I fear for Indiana's sake. If they come out flat like that and don't respect the opponent, it's a ball game. and Kent's gonna, if Kent plays with a 2 to 5 point lead the whole time, they can put it away fast because of how clutch Sincere and Malik are, and when the game's tight. But if Indiana values the opponent and they pay attention in their scouting reports and are on top of things, then they definitely have the ability to control the pace. But you never know what Indiana teams you're going to get when the ball's tipped. So I worry about them what team we're going to get, because Kent's not going to back down. They're going to be ready. They're going to be 10 toes down. Everybody on that bench is going to be ready to go. Their staff's going to be locked in. Their players are going to be ready to go. So should be an awesome game. I'm really excited, like I mentioned, just as a fan, with no dog in the fight either way. Obviously, it's a tight rivalry between us and Kent, and I'm from Indiana and love the Hoosiers, but take all the bias away and just sit down and watch a game. I think, and you can even tell on ESPN and CBS, a lot of people have circled this game as a potential upset, as Kent being a potential Cinderella team, because they understand that Kent has the ability, and they've proven it with their early season games against Houston, Gonzaga, and Charleston, where they came up really short, but they were really close to making it happen. So it's going to be a great game, and I'm really excited to watch for both teams' sakes.
Gosh, and it's not even what Indiana team is going to show up from game to game. Sometimes it's from like timeout to timeout. It's like within games, they're like 4 different teams within a game. Let me ask you, like, being inside a college locker room, I know you haven't played, but I mean, you've been there and you see this stuff up close. Like, what causes that? Because, it's like, Indiana goes and plays so well at Purdue, then they come out against Iowa. And it's like, we know this team plays hard. Like, they go out there and they're moving fast, like giving effort. But it's like the focus just flips on and off. Like what causes those inconsistencies? Is it more of a focus thing? Is it an effort thing? Like what do you typically see as being the reason when a team's just like playing almost inexplicably bad?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you hit it pretty close on the nail with focus. I have a hard time believing that many college players across the country don't play hard. I think obviously NIL's taken a little bit of purity out of the off the court stuff with college, but the purity of college athletics in general is what makes it such an appeasing thing to watch. And I think it's a testament to how hard the players play every night. I can turn on any game throughout the season. I'm like, damn, he's playing hard, and they're down 15. But like, the kids don't care, because everybody's trying to make it to the next level and get their big break. And that's what's so beautiful about college sports and college basketball, especially, is that it's never an effort thing. And, personally, I don't think it's an effort thing for a lot of teams. Obviously, your bottom feeders aren't playing really well. That's when you get some guys that struggle to give effort, because there's writing on the wall that they're not going to a postseason tournament or not doing anything after their last game. But every team in March, they're going to play hard. But I think you hit it on the nail with focus, because if like I said, I don't play heavy minutes. I haven't been there. But personally, I think if you're playing a game in January against, if you're playing against the 10th ranked team in your conference, and you're in the second half and you just hit the 12-minute media and you're up 15, you kind of relax a little bit mentally, not so much physically. And then bam, that's how we see the Indiana team that gives up a 10-0 run to a team that's not nearly as talented as them, but just came out of that media timeout. We talk about a lot as a team, valuing, from media to media. It's like there's games within the game. If you win so many of those sections, you're going to win the game. It makes a game sound so simple, but then when you think about a 40-minute game, you're like, oh my God, it's a long game. But winning those sections of those media timeouts every 4 minutes is really huge. So, lacking that focus in games, and you're playing a mediocre non-conference team in December. Sometimes it's hard to bring that juice mentally. You're playing a team that's bottom half of your conference, and you might not respect the opponent. That's when it's hard to bring the juice mentally. So I think you hit it totally on the nose, that it's more of a focus than physical thing. But like I said, it's March. It's the best tournament in the world. In my opinion, it's the best athletic event in the world is this tournament. So if you can't play hard and focus in March, then you're not meant to be a national champion or a Final Four contender. You know what I'm saying?
That's very well said. Man, you're good at this. Have you done a lot of media stuff before? Are you what are you studying? What are you planning to do after school?
I'm a sports business major. I've always been comfortable talking to just people in general. I'm not one to sit at home and play video games and just chill. If I have an opportunity to go be around people, whether I know them or not, I usually say yes because I love being around people and love talking. And it's so easy for me to talk about basketball, and when I saw your tweet and anything that says assembly call on it, anything that has the cream and crimson, I get excited. You can ask any, even my teammates, some of my teammates tease me like, dude, are you even a fan of Akron? Like all you do is talk about Indiana. Like they tease me because I love the Hoosiers. But yeah, talking about basketball is easy for me. So yeah, I just I love this opportunity. Like I mentioned, I want to give Kent their dues. They're a great team. It was easy to talk about both teams because I'm a huge Indiana fan. I've watched majority of their games. Obviously, I've played Kent 6 times in 2 years, and you take a couple of days to prepare for every team. So you're not only watching your own game, but you're watching clips from games prior. So seen a lot of Kent. Obviously, seen a lot of Hoosiers over my life. So this is a cool opportunity for me, and I enjoy talking about basketball with anybody.
Yeah, that's great, man. I really appreciate it. Well, let me get you out of here on this, which is, there's been a lot of talk about expanding the NCAA tournament. And a lot of times, when that happens, fans of schools like Indiana and big schools, the initial reaction is, no, there's already too many teams in the tournament. We don't want to water it down. But it strikes me that you may have an interesting perspective on this now, coming from the MAC, because you take a team like Toledo, who was awesome all year. They won the regular season MAC title, right?
They've won the last 3 regular season MAC titles.
Yeah, okay. And so they lose in the conference tournament, and now they don't make the NCAA tournament. But, all things considered, probably as deserving as a team like Kent to make, to be playing. I'm curious because, if they expanded the tournament, it would allow teams like Toledo in. I'm curious how much you've thought about that. Are you in favor of that? And if your experience now actually playing in the MAC kind of changes your perspective on how you view it.
Yeah, it's a great topic and a great thing to talk about. Initially, I think about it as just a pure fan. It's like if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. Like the tournament raises so much money. And I can't remember the numbers, but I read a Twitter thread last night just talking about just the money involved in the tournament, and it's unbelievable. So it's like it's been so good for so long that it's like, why change it? But being on a mid-major team, we would love to have another opportunity. We finished 3rd. We lost to the champions. We feel like we're a good team, and we feel like we can upset, Power 5 teams. There's some Power 5 teams that don't play great basketball, but they're just really athletic and they just get the job done. So teams like Toledo and us, we would love that opportunity. And if there was a vote, I guarantee all 15 of my teammates would vote, open this thing up, let more mid majors in, and let's play. But I get both sides. Like you mentioned, Toledo, unbelievable team. They've done a great job the last 3 years, just been super successful in conference. And, they just haven't gotten the job done in the tournament the last 3 years. They were the 1 seed this year, the 1 seed last year. And if they won the conference the year before, they were the 1 seed that year too, or tied, So a team like that who has had so much success and not rewarded with an NCAA tournament appearance hurts. I'm sure it hurts them. Kind of hurts me as just a MAC fan. Rivalry aside from Kent, I'm a MAC fan. If they weren't playing the Hoosiers, I would totally cheer for them. But since they're playing for the Hoosiers, I just want to watch the game and see how it plays out. So you, as a player in the MAC, you want to see more teams. I've had people ask me before, like, why are you guys not in the tournament? Why, you guys are a good team, and if you line us up against, say we were a bubble team, but Oklahoma State, they didn't make it this year, and they played 18 quad 1 games. Like that's sick. That is so sick. And you get some more of those teams in. I totally get it. We scheduled a pretty hard schedule this season, non-conference. We played Mississippi State there in the tournament. We played Nevada in the Grand Cayman tournament there in the tournament. We also played LSU out there, who they had it rolling at one point. At that point in the season, didn't fare very well in conference play this year. But if you open it up, you open up a chance for more upsets and more excitement, I think. In a team like us and in a program like us, like if we don't win the tournament, we would still love to go. If the NCAA called today and said, "Hey, we're going to fly you out tomorrow. Will you have your team ready?" I guarantee everybody in the team says we will be ready. So as a mid-major, you want that opportunity, but I totally understand that this is the greatest tournament in the world. Maybe the World Cup maybe competes with this, but that's every 4 years. So the greatest annual tournament is March Madness. And if it's not broken and there's no need to fix it, I get both sides. But we would love a chance.
Yeah, no, amen to that. So you were 22-11 this year, right?
Yes.
So did you have any thoughts about maybe making the NIT, or are you guys going to play anywhere, or is the season done?
I'm not. I don't know how all that works, to be honest with you. I watched the NIT selection show last night and saw that Toledo got in and they'll play Michigan. Should be a
Yeah.
great game for them. They're a great offensive team, like I mentioned. So I don't know the details of invites and stuff like that. I'm aware that there's a CBI and we didn't have practice today, so obviously we're not in anything. And from my understanding, you can accept or decline invitations to certain things, and I understand that. Maybe some of them you pay your own way. So
Yeah, CBI, I think you have to pay like 29 grand or something is the entry fee.
money I don't have, but I understand there's a lot more logistics behind it, and I'm not. Those decisions are made way above my head. So don't have much to say on that.
Well, Evan, I really appreciate this, man. It was a pleasure talking with you. Really appreciate the insight. I mean, I think this is probably as good of a scouting report between Indiana and Kent State as anyone's going to get, because you know the two teams as well as anybody. Where's the best place for IU fans to kind of connect with you and keep track of what you're doing?
Probably Twitter, Instagram. You have my Twitter. You tweeted my profile at ewilly02. My Instagram is at evan.wilson20. I'm pretty responsive. I'm pretty open. My DMs are open. I'm like I said, avid Hoosier fan. Saw some comments and people were excited. Some familiar faces, familiar names back home that were excited that I got this opportunity, and I was pretty excited too. So Twitter, Instagram is the best way to reach me. And not doing this for the fame, just doing this because I love sports. I love the MAC. I love the Big Ten. I love the Hoosiers. Kent's the rival, but I will have a little part of me will be rooting for them to play a good game and put some pressure on the Hoosiers and just hopefully see a great basketball game.
Well, good. No one does assembly call appearances for the fame. That's for sure. It's just to nerd out about hoops. That's what we do here. Well, cool. Evan, man, thank you so much for this. This was great. And, yeah, like you said, hopefully it's a great game. I assume that it will be. We, of course, hope that the Hoosiers come out on top. But the more that you kind of dig in and learn about this Kent State team, you realize Indiana better be ready, because this is not going to be easy at all. It should be a fun 40 minutes of basketball, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Appreciate it, man.
Yep.